She was trying not to think about it, but the thought kept emerging, like a dark patch of worry in her mind. She pushed back against the rising anxiety, but this time there was no containing it. It swelled behind her eyeballs and crept up her throat. She let it out in a scream of frustration. They were coming for her. She knew she had to flee. Christine Jiaxin Lee was 21 years old and studying electrical engineering at the Sydney University, and life was grand. She was affluent, and she loved flaunting her wealth. She lovingly caressed her newest purchase, a Hermes Birkin bag that set her back an incredible $1,500, and she smugly wondered if anyone had the faintest idea. She mistakenly thought that her misdeeds would never catch up to her. Christine spent an unbelievable amount of money, and her friends never questioned her spending. They, like everyone else, had the wool pulled over their eyes. They all assumed that her parents were sending funds to accommodate her every whim all the way from her home in Malaysia. Then, one day out of the blue, she got wind that she was under investigation. She knew what she was doing was risky, but she did it anyway. She had spent an exorbitant total of over $4.6 million in 11 months. She used her ill-gotten cash to obtain every luxury imaginable. She was draped from head to toe in the most expensive designer goods she could get her hands on. But surely the money wouldn't keep coming. Surely, they were onto her game. In the beginning, Christine was slightly surprised when her cash seemed to stretch a little further. She assumed what everyone else did. She thought her parents were secretly depositing money into her bank account to help her out. And while it was true that they were aiding her financially, it didn't explain her never-ending stream of cash. And now, she was about to face the full might of the law. Christine knew she couldn't run from the authorities forever, but she was going to try. She wasn't going to give up the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to that easily. She quickly hid money in her other bank accounts and applied for an emergency passport for Malaysia. Her plan was to flee Sydney and jet back home, where she thought the long arm of the law couldn't reach her. Christine's spending spree had been one to behold, and she was living her wildest fantasies. She was undoubtedly the richest girl on campus, and she adored every minute of it. If only she had reined in her impulses. If only she had been more careful with the money that she quickly realized wasn't hers to spend. She was ready. She had hastily packed up all her extravagant items, and was waiting for word on her emergency passport application. As soon as she had it, she would be whisked away from her troubles forever. But it wasn't meant to be. Christine was so close to getting away with her crime. But that's when she finally got caught. There she was, about to board the plane, when she was arrested. She appeared nonchalant to her accusers, but inside she was racked with anxiety. She knew she had to keep calm, lest they smell the guilt on her and hold her accountable for over $4.6 million. She knew deep in her heart that the fun had to end sometime. She had just hoped to stave it off for a little longer. You see, the money she spent so wantonly didn't belong to her. Westpac, her bank, chalked it up to a big, fat error. Due to a glitch in the banking system, Christine had been given an unlimited overdraft. She had lived every young girl's dream and spent money like there was no tomorrow for 11 glorious months. Christine Lee's entire collection of cellular phones, designer clothes and accessories were seized pending the outcome of the investigation, and she was not permitted to leave the country. The jig was finally up, and now she had to deal with the consequences. It was anyone's guess as to how that the court case would pan out. Christine told the authorities that she was unaware of the bank error, but they refuted this with evidence that she had knowingly frittered away a large sum of cash into her other bank accounts in preparation for the day she got caught. She thought it was truly over for her. But then something happened that surprised everyone. In an unexpected turn of events, all criminal charges against Christine were dropped after a similar case was thrown out of court. Her lawyer stated, she is happy it is behind her, and to move on with her life. It's a very interesting case, and an interesting outcome. It is obviously clear the bank should adopt better policies. Christine moved back home to Malaysia for good after the case was dropped. It is however unclear if her collection of designer label goods will be returned to her, and there may yet be a civil case. She has kept a low profile since her accidental millionaire status launched her into the limelight, but has gained a following on social media. Imagine that you were an instant millionaire. Would you have enjoyed every second of your new wealth and spent it on whatever your heart desired, or would you have reported the colossal mistake? Christine Lee lived like a queen for almost a whole year before she was arrested. She lived out a fantasy that most of us could only dream of. Would you have done the same? If you enjoyed this story, wait for our next story starting in 10 seconds. Starting a family can be rewarding but also heartbreaking. That's something Sarah and Andy Justice know a lot about. They wanted kids, but life threw a wrench in their plans. So the childless couple adopted 3 babies. But what ended up happening next took everyone by surprise. Sarah and Andy Justice were living a happy life in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was just one huge problem. They had no children, but not for lack of trying. Like many other couples out there, they simply couldn't conceive. The couple had been married for 3.5 years, but they couldn't seem to get pregnant. Their doctor offered them one possible solution, but they had to go all the way to St. Louis to see a specialist. In vitro fertilization would give them a 10% chance of conceiving a baby. That was a very slim percentage for a procedure that cost anywhere between $30,000 and $60,000. The psychological stress caused by infertility can wreak havoc in women. In fact, research suggests that the anxiety they experience is pretty similar to what terminal patients experience as well. But women are not the only ones who can experience so much stress. Men also experience anxiety, depression, decreased self-esteem and physical pain from the stress of the situation. It doesn't even matter if they're the infertile ones or if it's their partner who's infertile. Plus, there's a lot of pressure involved which makes everyone feel like they're trapped inside a pressure cooker. Infertility isn't easy on anyone. But it's even worse for couples when they're judged or pressured by family members, friends and strangers to start a family. But what's with all the urgency? In a lot of societies, young people are instilled with this sense of urgency to have babies right away because the biological clock is ticking. If anyone understood how uncomfortable this could be, it was the Justice family. Fertility treatments aren't a sure thing. When they don't work, a couple can feel like they've failed. It gets worse when the treatments put a strain on the household's finances too. Fortunately, there's always another alternative, and the Justice family was considering it. Many childless couples consider adoption because they want to provide a stable and loving home for an orphaned child. Since the fertility treatments failed, the Justice family turned to a higher power. They reached out to an agency that works with a faith-based crisis pregnancy group. This was the best way for them to adopt. But there was a long process ahead of them. Still, they were beyond willing to go through it. After all, they've been dreaming about becoming parents for way too long. The birth parents or the birth mother picks the family she wants her child to go to, explained Andy. And that's how it happened. The birth mother reached out and picked him and his wife. But there was an unexpected surprise none of them were expecting. Sarah took the birth mom to the doctor and discovered something shocking. "We went to a meeting where she had an ultrasound and found there was not 1 baby but 3 babies," she said. To which Andy replied, "Well, that's great, you said you wanted kids." "It was more than a little ironic," said Andy. "They intended to have 1, and ended up with triplets. But after they arranged to adopt the babies, Sarah's doctor dropped a massive bombshell. The couple had been praying for a miracle, and they ended up getting exactly what they wanted. In less than a year, the childless couple wound up with 5 babies after Sarah found out she was pregnant with twins, right after the triplets were born. "We were really excited because it was something we've been dreaming of and longing for years," Sarah told Today. But, as you can imagine, it took them a while to figure everything out. The couple had 5 extra mouths to feed, and they also had a lot of adjusting to do. For starters, they needed a bigger van to accommodate everyone. But they needed more than just space. The couple went through approximately 300 diapers a week. They also had to spend money on other things like baby bottles and clothes. But figuring out who was who became a real challenge. How would they be able to tell them apart when they all looked so similar? The Justice family was able to tell the triplets apart by painting their toenails a different colors. But in the winter, they had to use bows to differentiate the 3 little girls, as their feet would have been covered. It was definitely challenging, but they weren't alone. The couple's lives were no longer their own. They revolved around their kids. Fortunately, they had plenty of help from their family, and of course, their church. But Andy's job made things easier too. Since Andy's self-employed, he was able to adjust his schedule to help his wife. But even with all the help they received, catching up on sleep was practically impossible to do. Andy told Today that they only got about 3 hours of sleep per night, but not necessarily all at once. The kids would often disrupt their sleep cycles, but in the end, it was all worth it. "My husband says all we do is babies, everything else in life has pretty much stopped," said Sarah. But even though it was a lot of hard work, they loved raising their family. And now that the kids are older, they're helping around the home a lot. "I bought 2 spray bottles and filled them with water and vinegar, and the girls can't wait to clean the bathrooms," Sarah wrote on the couple's Facebook page. Now everyone in the family gets to work and play, including mom and dad. On May 28, 2018, the couple wrote, "Happy birthday to our 3 sweet miracles." It is hard to believe that 5 years ago on May 18 these 3 were born weighing a little over 3 pounds each. But was there room for one more? The childless couple wound up with 5 kids, but in January 2016, Sarah got pregnant again, and had little Caleb. It's hard to believe that a few years ago, the couple feared they'd never have kids. Now Andy and Sarah ended up getting what they wished for, and more.